Have you ever wondered why a few control everything while the majority barely survive? I'm Karl Marx. Reloaded, and this division is neither natural nor eternal. It all began when society reached a crucial point. We could produce more than what was necessary to survive. And that's when the division between oppressors and the oppressed emerged.
Welcome to Marx Quotes.
A small group took control of something fundamental, the means of production. What are they? Tools, land, resources. Everything needed to produce goods. The moment survival no longer required everyone to work, when there was surplus, that's when a small group stopped working and was supported by the rest of society. And that's how the division began. My famous phrase, "The history of all hitherto existing society is the history of class struggles," refers to the fact that, from this moment on, class struggle begins. Throughout history, this division has taken different forms. Masters and slaves. Patricians and plebeians. Nobles and serfs. And finally, the bourgeoisie and the proletariat.
If you like the content, please like and subscribe.
Modern society. Class antagonisms have been simplified. We no longer have the complex hierarchy of feudalism. No, now everything mainly boils down to two major groups. The bourgeoisie, the owners of the means of production, factories, machinery, resources. And the proletariat, the working class, who own nothing but their labor power. Watch how this evolved. From medieval guilds, we moved to manufacturing. Small workshops were replaced by large factories. The steam engine changed everything. Production was no longer dependent on the artisan's skill, but on machines.
But there's something even more important to understand, something that goes beyond factories, wages, and machines. Class consciousness. It's not enough for the economic conflict to exist. It's not enough for the proletariat to suffer the injustices of the system. They must understand their position in this game. Why? Because revolution isn't just about overthrowing economic structures, it's about awakening consciousness. Imagine this, a worker who spends their entire life in a factory, producing wealth for others, but never questions why their effort benefits a few. That worker lives in alienation, disconnected from the true value of their labor and their collective power. But when that same worker begins to understand that they are not alone, that there are millions like them around the world, something changes. When they realize that their strength doesn't lie in their individuality, but in their unity with others, class consciousness emerges. Class consciousness is the moment when the proletariat stops seeing itself as a passive victim and recognizes itself as the engine of history. It's when they understand that their struggle isn't just for better wages, but to transform the system that oppresses them. And this doesn't happen overnight. It's a process, a spark that ignites when workers organize, educate themselves, and rebel against the invisible chains that bind them. That's why revolution isn't just a violent act or a change of government. It's a collective awakening. It's the realization that power doesn't lie in the hands of a few, but in the unity of many. And when that consciousness spreads, no wall can stop it.
You see, the so-called free market is a deadly trap for small business owners. Let me show you why. Imagine a game where everyone starts with the same amount of money, but some players have a hidden advantage. The big capitalists have three superpowers that make them practically unbeatable. Keycap 1, they can produce at a lower cost. Why? Simple, they buy in bulk, have better machines, and more technology. It's like they get to pay less for the same thing every turn. Keycap 2, they can endure losses for months or even years. Have you noticed how some companies offer services almost for free at first? It's not generosity, it's strategy. Keycap 3, they can eliminate any competition. If a rival appears, they buy it or crush it. In the Communist Manifesto, I wrote, "The small industrialist, the shopkeeper, the rentier, the artisan, and the peasant all fall into the proletariat because their small capital is insufficient to compete with the large capitalists." D. Oh, you remember the small shops in your neighborhood? Let me explain why they are disappearing. And why this is just the beginning. Think about your city 20 years ago. What has changed? Local bookstores were displaced by Amazon. Small businesses by Walmart. Family-run hotels by Airbnb. Local taxis by Uber. Family restaurants by fast food chains. In the Communist Manifesto, I also wrote, "The bourgeoisie cannot exist without constantly revolutionizing the instruments of production." This means that capitalism must constantly destroy traditional ways of life and work. Not for true progress, but because of the relentless logic of accumulation.
Capitalism is like an avalanche. It needs to keep growing, absorbing more resources, more markets, and more workers to stay in motion. In 1848, I wrote something that seems obvious today but was revolutionary at the time. Capitalism requires a constantly expanding market. First, it needs new markets. Why is there a McDonald's in every corner of the world? Second, it needs cheap labor. Why do you think your clothes are made in Asia? Third, it needs untapped resources. Have you noticed how big tech companies are now obsessed with Africa? The more capitalism expands, the more its contradictions become evident. Capital is concentrated globally. And so is the working class. The same corporations exploit workers all over the world. Job insecurity spreads globally. Economic crises affect everyone at the same time. In the Communist Manifesto, I wrote, "With the development of large-scale industry, the bourgeoisie itself provides the proletariat with the weapons to fight it. Competition among workers weakens them, but again and again, they rise up, stronger and more organized." History keeps moving, driven by these class contradictions. History is not a tale written by a few, but a constant battle between those who produce and those who take. Capitalism has brought unimaginable wealth, but it has also created inequalities that threaten to consume everything. Yet, there is one thing the system cannot control: the consciousness of those who sustain it. Class struggle is not just a relic of the past. It is a reality that pulses in every factory, every office, every corner of the globalized world. And though the path is not easy, history teaches us that when the people awaken, they are unstoppable. So as long as there are oppressors and oppressed, the flame of revolution will remain alive. Because, as I said more than a century ago, the philosophers have only interpreted the world in various ways. The point, however, is to change it. And you, dear viewers, are part of that transformation. The question is, what role will you choose to play in this history? Workers of the world, unite!